Have you ever felt like something was wrong but couldn't explain it? The strange smell, the nightmares, that feeling of being watched. It all seemed like a simple coincidence until I discovered the truth, and it was so much worse than I could have imagined. What was supposed to be just a common vegetable garden became a real nightmare. What if I told you that I planted something where I never should have? Something that awakened a presence that didn't want to be disturbed. But calm down, there is a way out. And I'll tell you everything now. Get ready, because this story will give you goosebumps. Today we have another incredible story through the stories you sent me. It arrived directly in our email. Each story I receive is edited with great care to maintain the atmosphere of mystery and terror, always respecting the privacy of those who decided to share these scary moments with us. Now, an important warning. I believe in the experiences they send me, but I have no way of proving whether all this really happened. So the decision to believe or not is up to you. Well, let me introduce myself. My name is Januario, and I've been a gravedigger for almost 7 years. I didn't choose this profession of my own free will, but it was the path that life gave me. Since I was little, I've always liked calm places, and it was in the cemetery that I found exactly that, at least most of the time. My routine? It starts early, before the sun rises. I take care of the tombstones, dig graves when necessary, and make sure everything is in order. The cemetery where I work is small, far from the city, and surrounded by trees so tall they block the sunlight. Here, almost no one shows up. The dead? These are constant companions. The place is peaceful, but there are days when the silence is heavy. A lot of people think that working in the cemetery is scary or even cursed, but for me, it's just another job. The dead don't scare me. What really scares me are the living, and it's because of them that I often end up spending more time here than at home. Earning extra money at the end of the month makes all the difference. Supporting my family is not easy, and this work, as lonely as it is what puts food on the table. But do you want to know? Here at the cemetery, I even created my own corner. In the break room, there is an old chair and a table that is worn out by time. It's simple, but it's my refuge. During breaks, I drink a coffee, read the newspaper, or just listen to the wind shake the trees. It was in one of those moments of peace that I had an idea. Next to the room, there was an abandoned piece of land overgrown with weeds. The soil looked good, so I thought, why not plant something here? I always wanted to have a little garden. The next day, I brought some lettuce, carrot and tomato seeds and started digging the soil. Over time, the seedlings started to grow, and look, it was incredible. I watered every day and was impressed by how quickly the plants developed. It was as if the ground had a special energy. The leaves were greener, the vegetables larger than any I had ever seen at the market. Each week, I took a basketful home. My wife said I had magic hands for planting, and my children, Lucas and Mariana, ate everything with gusto, but not everything that seems good actually is. Over time, I started to notice something strange. You know that feeling when someone is watching you? I felt this every time I touched the garden. I looked around and didn't see anyone. At first, I thought it was just tiredness, but the feeling didn't go away. Things got even weirder when I started dreaming about the cemetery. In dreams, I heard voices whispering as if they were the plants themselves talking to me. I would wake up in the middle of the night with my heart racing, as if I had run a marathon. At first I tried to ignore it, but today, looking back, I think those were the first signs that something wasn't right. If I had known where this was going, I might have stopped right there. Maybe he would have ripped it all out and left the ground alone, but I didn't know, and we only realize the danger when it is already right in front of us. The days at the cemetery followed the same routine, as always, but the garden became my favorite place. Whenever I wasn't digging graves or cleaning tombstones, I was there, tending to the plants. And look, it was something out of the ordinary. The tomatoes turned so red they seemed to glow. The lettuce leaves were so green they almost sparkled in the sun, and the carrots grew huge as if from another world. My wife, Teresa, was radiant. He said that the vegetables from the garden had a different flavor, fresher, more lively. My kids loved it too. Lucas, the youngest, was always running around the house with a carrot in his hand. Mariana, my teenager, liked to prepare the vegetables I brought. Our house was simple, as was our life. It was in a remote neighborhood, full of similar little houses. We never had luxury, but we always had enough. And with the garden helping to save money at the fair, I started to think that this could be the beginning of something bigger. But, little by little, I started to notice strange things. First, it was Lucas. He was always full of energy. But suddenly he started waking up crying in the middle of the night. He said he dreamed of dark people standing next to his bed, looking at him. I tried to calm him down, saying it was just a nightmare, but the night started to get harder and harder. Then it was Mariana. She started to complain that she felt someone touching her arm or shoulder when she was alone in the room. At first I thought it was all in her head, but deep down a shiver ran up my spine. Teresa thought it was just a teenage thing, but I already had the bug behind my ear. At work, the cemetery started to look different. The silence, which was something I liked before, now bothered me. Sometimes, when I was watering the garden, I would hear footsteps in the grass. Other times, a whisper coming from behind the trees. It was as if the place was more alive. It was then that I decided to ask Mr. Amancio, the oldest gardener there, if he had ever seen anything strange in the cemetery. He just smiled and said, "Strange? Here. That's plenty, Januario. This place has more stories than you can imagine." Then he told about the ancient burials of people buried without names, without ceremonies. He said that years ago the cemetery was used for strange rituals when some people came at night to do things that no one dared to investigate. That kept bouncing around in my head. Did the soil in my garden have something special? Did some strange energy come from these burials? Of these rituals, I didn't want to believe it. But something inside me wouldn't leave me alone, and the situation only got worse. Teresa started to feel bad. My wife, who had always been strong and full of energy, began to complain of constant headaches, fever, and tiredness. He said he felt as if something was draining his energy, but the doctors, they found nothing wrong. Meanwhile, my dreams got stranger. I dreamed of the garden growing out of control, the plants wrapping themselves around me as if they had a life of their own. What started as a simple hobby was turning into a nightmare, and I felt deep down that this was just the beginning. At the cemetery, I started to notice something bizarre. The soil in my garden was not normal. One day, while pulling some weeds, I saw that the roots of the plants were too big. They seemed to stretch very deep into the earth, and some had strange shapes. That gave me goosebumps. It was the first time I thought about giving up the garden. But something stopped me. It was as if a part of me was trapped in that piece of land. And the food. They continued to grow beautiful and perfect, but for some reason just looking at them gave me a strange shiver. The smell was different, stronger, almost too sweet. Once, when biting into a carrot, I felt a metallic taste, as if it were blood. My stomach instantly turned. I threw it away, tried to forget, but I didn't say anything to Teresa or the children, but things didn't get better. Teresa began to have high fevers and pain that did not go away. The medicines didn't work, and the nights became increasingly strange. Lucas's nightmares seemed to be spreading throughout the house, until one night, Mariana woke up screaming. He said he felt someone pulling his blanket. That gave me goosebumps from head to toe, but the last straw was when I started to feel strange things. One morning, I woke up in a cold sweat. My heart was racing. I looked into the corner of the room, and for a second, I swear I saw a shadow standing there. I blinked and nothing. But the feeling that someone was there with me didn't go away. The next day, the sky was cloudy, the air heavy. Even so, I went to the garden to harvest the vegetables as usual. The rain from the previous night left the earth damp. The smell of wet grass was strong. I grabbed my bucket and started. Lettuce, tomato. Everything grew big and perfect, as always. When I got to the carrots, I pulled the first one, then the second, the third. Everything normal. But then came the fourth carrot. When I tried to pull it out, something was wrong. She didn't come out as easily as the others. She looked trapped. I squeezed firmly and pulled harder, but I felt resistance, as if something was holding the plant in the ground. My heart accelerated. I knelt down to get a better look. I dug with my hands around the stem, pushing away the earth. That's when I saw it. There, in the middle of the dark earth, a white, rounded surface appeared. At first, I thought it was a rock, but as I cleaned around it, I noticed the shape. It was a human skull. I was paralyzed. And then I saw the scariest thing. The carrot I was trying to pull was growing inside the skull. One of the roots ran through the eye socket, as if the bone had become part of the soil that fed the plants. My stomach turned. My hands were shaking. The idea that my garden was growing on top of human remains made me sick to my stomach, but at the same time, I needed to know more. I picked up the shovel and started digging, and as the earth left, the fear only increased. There he was, the entire skeleton, buried without a coffin, without anything. The earth around was darker, wetter, and the smell, a mix of iron and rot. I released the shovel and walked away, trying to control my breathing. My mind was spinning. Who was this person? Why was it buried there like that? And the worst part, how many other bodies could be under my garden? It was at that moment that I felt something even worse, a presence. It was as if the cemetery itself had grown denser, heavier. Someone or something was watching me. That night, at home, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the image of the skull with the carrot through its eye, as if it were a warning. And then, after a lot of internal struggle, I decided to tell Mr. Amancio everything. When I finished, he fell silent, looking at the floor, as if I already knew. Januario, what you found, well, it's not the first time something like this has happened. My spine froze. Like this, he sighed, visibly uncomfortable. I only take care of the plants and avoid touching where I shouldn't. And what do I do now? I asked, desperate. Amancio hesitated. Then he said quietly, there is someone who can help you. The healer. Healer? What healer? The gravedigger before me. He worked here for decades, but one day, he dropped everything and left. They say he knew too much about the cemetery. He knew things that no one should know, and the weight of that, well, it ended up taking him away from here. Where can I find this man? I asked. Mr. Amancio took a piece of paper and scribbled an address. It's far away, in the middle of the forest. I haven't seen him in years. I don't even know if he's still alive. But if he does, he'll know what to do. The trip was difficult. The trail was almost impassable, full of low branches and strange noises coming from the forest. The whole time I had the feeling that something or someone was watching me. After much effort, I arrived. It was a simple little mud house, hidden among trees so dense that barely any light passed through. My heart was racing, and I didn't even know if it was from tiredness or fear. I knocked on the aged wooden door. It took a while, minutes that seemed like an eternity, until the door creaked and opened. There he was, a very old man with a wrinkled face, small eyes, but full of a strange shine. He must have been over 90 years old, but he still looked strong, like someone who had seen a lot in his life. Before I said anything, he looked at me firmly and said, in a hoarse voice, I know why you're here. I had no reaction. He just opened. the door wider and gestured for me to enter. Inside, the smell of herbs and wood stove smoke was strong. Bottles of colored liquids hung on the shelves. Dry roots were scattered in a corner. The old man sat in a rocking chair and studied me as if he already knew my whole story. "Sit down, my son." He pointed to a chair in front of him. I obeyed. "Bettino has already come here." My heart skipped a beat. "Bettino? Who is this?" The healer shook his head, a sad smile on his face. "The man you dug up." "What did you find in your garden?" My blood ran cold. But I didn't know there was a body there." The old man looked at me seriously. "It doesn't matter if you knew or not. The earth holds everything, and there are people who don't rest easily. Bettino was one of those people." I swallowed hard. Who was he? The silence inside the house was so heavy that it seemed to suffocate. The healer sighed, as if remembering would open an old wound. "Bettino was a good boy. I worked at the cemetery just like you. He was young, full of life, but he made the mistake of catching the attention of the wrong woman." I leaned forward. "What? Woman?" The old man pursed his lips. "Mr. Armando's wife," I frowned. "The former owner of the cemetery?" He nodded. "Armando was a powerful man, but also cruel and jealous. He thought everything around him was his, including his wife. He paused for a long time before continuing. "They say Bettino never did anything, but Armando's wife liked him. And even if he hadn't reciprocated, distrust alone was enough to seal his fate." My stomach dropped. "What happened to him?" The old man lowered his head. "Armando sent the henchmen to get Bettino. It was on a road, near the cemetery. They caught him at night. They tortured the boy for hours, trying to get a confession he couldn't give. And then they ended him in a cruel way." I closed my eyes, trying to digest it. My God. But it wasn't just that. The healer's voice became darker. "They threw his body in an open ditch, as if it were trash, without ceremony. No respect." He looked me in the eyes. "I went there that same night." My breath caught. "What?" "I saw what they did, and I knew that Bettino deserved more than that. So I went to the ditch. I took the body. I felt an icy shiver run up my spine. And what did you do with him?" The healer took a deep breath before responding. "I buried him next to the cemetery room. There, near the wall." My head started to spin. The room, my vegetable garden, everything started to connect. But why is he angry now? The old man stared at me with fixed eyes. "Because you planted a plant on his head." My mouth went dry. "What?" He leaned back in his chair, his voice low, as if he were telling a forbidden secret. "The skull you found was his, and the carrot that grew in his eye was the final straw." The healer looked at me seriously. "He feels like you disrespected his rest, even without meaning to." I swallowed hard. Never in my life did I think I would go through something like this. All I wanted was to save a little money at the market, plant some things in the cemetery, and occupy my time. But without meaning to, I ended up awakening something much bigger. "What do I do now?" I asked, almost in a whisper. The old man took a bottle of dark liquid and placed it on the table. Then he took some dried herbs and tied them with a string. "First, you will undo what you did. Take everything out of your garden, plant by plant. Clean the soil. And then," he stared at me, "then you go there and apologize." Just that. It's not just talking. You have to feel it. Bettino doesn't want empty words. He wants respect. I looked at the bottle and the herbs, not understanding how that would solve something so big. "Will this work?" The healer slowly shook his head. "This is just the beginning. You will understand what he really wants when you get there." I sighed. What if he doesn't forgive me? The old man gave a slight smile, but his eyes remained serious. You're lucky he's my friend. I left that house, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. I needed to fix what I did. But would Bettino accept my regret? Or was his anger past the point of no return? The meeting. The night was dark when I returned to the cemetery. The wind whispered between the trees, and they swayed as if they had a life of their own. Every step I took on the dry land echoed in the deep silence of the dawn. My garden looked different, dark, as if he was waiting for me. I knelt down and started pulling up the plants. Each stem seemed to resist, as if the soil itself was holding the roots, refusing to let go. My heart was beating hard. The silence was so heavy that I could hear my own breathing. After cleaning everything up, I picked up the bottle and herbs. The healer said I should burn the leaves and spread the dark liquid on the ground while apologizing. I did exactly that. My voice came out shaky. Bettino, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. The words seemed to disappear into thin air. Please, forgive me. I didn't mean to disrespect you. The silence grew even deeper. I was waiting for a sign, anything that would tell me he had heard. It was then that the earth began to shake, very lightly at first, but I felt it, and then the fog appeared, a dark, thick mist crawling across the ground, slowly rising. My heart raced. I tried to get up, but it was as if the ground was holding me back. The mist spread, covering everything around me. It had a metallic smell, a bloody smell. Suddenly I saw figures, faceless shadows, hands coming out of the ground. Voices whispered things I couldn't understand. Bettino, I called. My voice echoed in the void. The fog continued to rise, swirling in spirals, and then a light appeared, weak at first, but it grew, stronger and stronger. It was as if he was pulling the darkness away, ripping that heavy energy from the cemetery. I stood there, motionless, watching everything mesmerized. The mist became thinner, lighter, until it disappeared completely, and then silence. But a different silence. It wasn't the suffocating silence it had been before. It was calm. It was light. I felt my muscles relax, and without understanding why, tears began to stream down my face. I looked at the ground. Everything seemed normal, but I knew something had changed. The next morning I returned to the cemetery. My vegetable garden, or what was left of it, was now just an empty patch of land. But the ground felt different, clearer, softer, as if it had been renewed. I went to the break room and looked out the window. I expected, or feared, to see Bettino sitting in the corner, as the healer had described. But he wasn't there. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was truly alone. In the days that followed, I noticed that my life began to return to normal. My wife, Teresa, who had been ill, started to get better. The fevers that tormented my children disappeared, as if by magic. It was as if a weight had been lifted from my family. But the cemetery was never the same again. I continued working normally, but something inside me said I needed to go back to the healer's house. He had helped me in ways no one else could, and I wanted to thank him. So, before going, I went to the market and bought a basic basket. The trail through the woods felt different this time. Before, it was dark, closed, suffocating. Now the sun's rays broke through the leaves of the trees, illuminating the path. When I arrived at the little mud house, I felt something strange. The door was ajar, and a thin smoke was coming out of the chimney, as if someone was cooking. I knocked on the door, expecting to hear the old man's hoarse voice. But to my surprise, two unknown men appeared. They were hunters. They were dirty with dirt, with backpacks left on the floor and weapons leaning against the wall. One of them frowned when he saw me. "Can I help?" I swallowed hard. "The gentleman who lives here, I need to talk to him." The two exchanged confused looks. The oldest shook his head. "What, sir?" "Nobody lives here. We only use this house to spend the night when we are hunting." My heart accelerated. No, you are mistaken. I was here last month. A very old man lives here. He helped me. He gave me this. I took the dark bottle out of my pocket and showed it to them. The younger hunter looked and shrugged, but the eldest became serious. Look, my friend, this house has been abandoned for years. Her owner died a long time ago, an old man named Josiah. They say he was a healer or something, but he passed away a long time ago. My stomach turned. How long? I asked, feeling the ground disappear beneath my feet. The hunter scratched his head. About 3 years, I think. Everyone around here knows that. The world spun. My mind went back to the day of the meeting. I remembered the smell of herbs, the old man's firm voice, the way he looked at me. Everything seemed so real. But Guy, what if it wasn't? My voice came out shaky. But Guy, I was here. He spoke to me. The older hunter just shook his head. It must have been your imagination, or maybe something else. I left there stunned, the bottle still clutched in my hand. I didn't know if old Josiah was a spirit, an illusion, or something I would never understand. But somehow he helped me. And when I got back to the cemetery, I felt like the weight was gone. Not just from there, but from my life. Bettina was at peace, and maybe old Josiah was too. If you liked this story, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss the next videos. This helps a lot. Thanks for following along, and see you in the next video.